Okay, so this is our first web chat and video for the Job Club at Visual Foundation. We just wanted to start off by giving some intros into who we are and giving you a quick overview of what we'll be looking to do. So I'll kick off. I'm Abby. I've been at Visual now for 5 years. I've had a number of jobs since I've been at Visual and whilst I've been at Visual. And I've changed my career about 3 or 4 times, depending upon if you start from what my degree's in. So the reason I thought it would kind of be good for me to get involved is to kind of talk through some of the things I've done, some of the interview experiences I've had, that it's normal to change careers and change your mind as to what you actually want to do, and just kind of bring a bit of insight into interview techniques and some of the stuff I do in preparation for exams. Pass over to Charlotte.
Yeah, so my name's Charlotte May. I am the HR advisor at Visual. I started Visual in 2017, at which point I was pretty much straight out of uni. I did have a kind of brief stint at a different organisation before then, but this has been my only real job, as I consider it. I've had the opportunity to learn a lot so far. So I've completed my postgraduate diploma in human resources management, which has been kind of the highlight so far. And since 2019, I've led the HR team. Now, one of the main things that we do is recruitment. So we've brought all of our recruitment internally at Visual, and that's kind of where my interest in the Careers Club comes from. So I've spent a lot of time over the last few years shortlisting CVs, interviewing candidates. So I think that's kind of what gives me a good starting point in being able to advise those who need some support in getting into work. Abby, hand over to you.
Yeah, so from my point of view, as part of the Careers Club, I want to sort of help from my experience from one of those people that didn't go to uni and decided to go straight into work, and obviously all the things that you get put up against when you're seen as not going to university is a bad thing. But for me, it's been a really positive experience, and it's meant that I could get into work a lot quicker, whereas obviously some of my friends that went to university couldn't. So I think from my point of view, that's where I'd like to help people that university isn't the be all and end all, and they can make a good career path without it. But also as well, sort of my passion really is to get people back into work as well. So people that might have been struggling with writing CVs or getting interviews in the first place, and just really getting them on the right path to start looking at what they want to do as a job and a career. Hand over to Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try and keep mine short and sweet. But yeah, Jack and I've been at Visual 3 years now, which seems to have gone very quickly. I've actually kind of had 2 roles. So I did start off as inside seller. I'm now a Microsoft partner manager. And yeah, I suppose where I'll be looking to come from really and try and help on is, similar to Charlotte. I came into Visual as a graduate, kind of leaving university and kind of having that challenge of there's so many people coming to the market looking for jobs, and yeah, I think some of the experience we'll all have had will just kind of help really, especially with it being so competitive and likewise. So yeah, here to help really. James.
Thanks, Jack. I remember when you joined us as a fresh-faced graduate, no longer so fresh-faced. So I'm James. I'm the sales manager for Visual. Prior to Visual, I spent 5 years working for a member of parliament. When I worked there, I helped establish a charity which at the time focused on the promotion of apprenticeships. We ran and held 2 jobs fairs every year. Did work here within the schools as well, and ran a weekly job club. And then just prior to that, I did a year at a mental health hospital, which was very interesting. I'm a big believer in your potential being one thing and what you do with it is another. And in my spare time, I'm a local councillor and I get a great deal of enjoyment from helping and supporting people. So hopefully I can bring with me a variety of hats and hopefully help and support people.
Lovely. I think, do we want to go into questions now? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, go for it.
So I pulled together some kind of questions that I thought we could kind of run through. So kind of to anyone really. what experiences everybody kind of faced when they've been going into interviews? If we kind of for interview styles, what sort of interview styles have you particularly come across? Anything in particularly unusual or any kind of different experiences that you faced?
Yeah, I've got a couple of kind of insights there from sorry, from entering, as Jack said, into the graduate market and applying for graduate schemes initially, where obviously the caliber of candidate is crazy, and everybody seems to have a degree, and it seems so difficult to kind of establish yourself in that market when there can be thousands and thousands of people applying for just a small number of jobs, and that is really tricky to keep yourself motivated throughout that process. I think is really, really difficult, and that's definitely something hopefully we might be able to help with. In terms of interview experience, obviously a lot of interviews now are done remotely, especially in big graduate scheme programs, because it's just not feasible to get everybody together in one place, especially with what's going on at the moment. So one of my particular examples is I was on a Skype interview, and I'd never even used Skype before. So I was on a Skype interview, luckily with a human, because I did do some interviews where there wasn't even a human on the other side of it. It was just like a question would pop up on the screen, you had to answer it. So that was bizarre. This one with a person, I was asked the most difficult question I've ever been asked in an interview, and it was, how do you describe the colour yellow to someone who is blind and has been blind from birth?
Oh wow.
And I was absolutely thrown, literally not a clue. I can't remember what I said. I must have just stumbled through it and said some absolute rubbish. And then a little bit later on, she kind of paused the interview and she looked at me and said, "Make me laugh." Deadpan, so serious. And honestly, I was just beside myself. I didn't know what to do. Like, it's just not a situation that was comfortable for me at all. And actually, it's funny now to look back and kind of laugh about it, but at the time I was absolutely mortified. It was the worst, just the worst experience, really. And then just one other thing that I'll share quickly before I let someone else take over is at one stage in my third year at university, I was applying for jobs constantly. I would have 3 or 4 telephone interviews in a day, and it was really, really difficult to keep track. So one of my biggest tips would be just to make sure that you're tracking who you're applying to, what stage you're at, when that interview is, and just make sure you're really, really organised, because I got caught off guard with a telephone interview once. I can't remember who it was with, but it was a really, really large organisation. It was the first stage of the telephone interview. And she rang me and I tried to do it, but having not prepped, not done, I think it was like an energy company, and I don't know anything about energy, and she was asking me all kinds of things about energy and I didn't have a clue, whereas normally I would have done my research and at least had a decent indication of what I was going to talk about. And I just burst into tears in the middle of the interview because I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know what's going on, I wasn't expecting this, and it was an absolute disaster. So my biggest tip would be definitely to make sure you're prepared, make sure you're organised, and make sure you know when your interviews are, because it was a terrible experience.
Yeah.
So how did you describe the colour yellow? That was what I wanted to know.
I don't think we want to go there, to be honest.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, the first interview I ever had, obviously leaving after doing A levels and going into full-time work, and I went and joined an IT company. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me and petrified me when I walked into the room was 5 males just all sat opposite, and then you're sat just on your own, and it's like you're being interrogated. It was almost like, and it just makes you feel so on edge, and like you're not sure how they're going to take you, and then you just start, it really gets to you. So I think it's always thinking about what organisation you're going to be interviewed by, and sort of getting yourself mentally prepared that could be that it's more male dominated, or there's not going to be an even mix, that you just know you're prepared for it, rather than walking in and going, oh no, what am I going to do? And I think especially I was 18 at that time, so now I wouldn't even care whether it was a room full of males or females. But when you're 18 and don't have any of that experience, it's quite daunting.
Yeah, I think as well, suppose building on what Charlotte said as well. I think when I was, say, leaving university and trying to look for jobs and stuff, I probably had a bit of a different experience actually, where a lot of mine were in person, but in big groups. And, that can be a challenge, but I suppose a bit of guidance. It might sound really obvious, but you've just got to get involved. End of the day, they're setting these days up to test a lot of qualities in a person, and don't go in there being fake and trying to fake something, because that's going to come out. I suppose just get involved, and whilst you're all competing with each other for a job, I think it's probably the best thing to. It's a good trait to get on with people, and almost help other people out if you can see them in an awkward position. By trying to help them, that's a good thing in your stead as well. I think that's what I particularly saw quite a lot. And going back to the research side, I think really important, and knowing some really weird stuff about an organisation, I think sometimes really helps, because you never know what will crop up. Pre-Visual, I remember I went for a job role, and it's for a manufacturing firm, and they asked me about one of their really unique products. And without really doing some research, it's something you just wouldn't really know anything about, and you can't blag yourself through it. So I suppose advice there is just research and be prepared, because interviews come in a different manner of things. You're always being tested. Don't be embarrassed and don't be afraid. You've just got to enjoy it, and part of it is character building, and interviews are a massive learning experience, and you're gonna have to go through a few before you're picking up some good confidence. So don't be afraid, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, Jack. Trying to maintain your composure is really crucial. I accidentally once took a cup of tea off the person who was about to interview me, thinking it was the receptionist who was bringing me my cup of tea. Made a bit of a joke about it, but I felt like a right tit. But it's I certainly became a memorable candidate in that interview, and I think being prepared with questions, even if they get answered during the interview itself, I think don't be afraid to repeat them at the end of the interview, because at least it shows you have done the research and you have put the preparation into it before you went in there. And then the other thing I did think about was recruitment agencies as well. Sometimes they get forgotten and overlooked. Using recruitment agencies to help you look for work, even if it's just part-time, something for a short window. It's always quite helpful knowing you've got an extra pair of eyes looking out for you and trying to find you a job. That kind of takes a little bit of the pressure away. And also they coach you through the interview process as well, which is always helpful.
Yeah. I think something I've always done is I've always made notes that I've taken in with me when I'm going for interviews and things, even if it's a memory jogger, and obviously some people want you to kind of show that you've done that prep. But I think especially when I joined Visual, I think like the directors were really happy that I'd kind of put so much prep in and made like, I'm a little bit over the top, but like a bit of a forward was to everything I'd researched, all the stuff I'd printed off. And I know obviously things will be a lot more remote now, but just kind of showing that evidence that you've actually taken the time to kind of go through, understand it. Even if you don't understand it all, because obviously, especially in this industry, there's a lot to know. But just kind of knowing your stuff and being able to refer to something so you do look prepared, I think something else that everyone seems to think is a kind of a good trait from an employer. So has anybody come across any particular resources that we think are kind of good to help? I know that me and you, Jack, were having a conversation about this earlier. But even like now in your sort of where you are now, like when you were looking for this job, or even when you were kind of finishing uni, were the particular resources that you used when you were like looking for a new job?
Yeah, so I think there's so obviously a couple of things out there, and as we push to more and more remote, you'll start to see loads of things come up. So I think James touched on a vital point there on recruiters. Using their resource and website, I think is a great place to start. LinkedIn's becoming a huge area now for jobs, but and there's some really specialist stuff, like when you're coming out from university, there's things like I think it was called the milk round or something like that, where actually it's a system built for graduates coming out or people from college that were looking for that their kind of first job and career, called the milk round. But again, you had some huge organizations on there promoting early in career jobs. That'd be a great place to start. And also I think leveraging your college or university in terms of their unions as well. you know, actually, have they got careers counsellors? Have they got career guidance that you can go and sort of talk to, and actually have those places you've been before got connections with maybe organisations that you can start to leverage? Because you know, even in industry, it's, you know, it's who you know as well that will ultimately help you. So yeah, I think it's using those mix really that certainly helped me, and, you know, got me into certain places or certain interviews that helped me really. Yeah,
LinkedIn's a massive one, isn't it? And that's how I got made aware of a job in Risual. Some recruiter contacted me, and the rest is history. But yeah, LinkedIn, I'm seeing it used a lot more. And obviously, as you build out your networks, you see people asking for opportunities, or if you can like sort of put the two together where you see someone advertising and you can personally recommend someone for that role, it starts to build that bigger community as well.
Yeah, just to pick up on just to pick up on on something Jack just said, I think the people you know are really, really important. And if you can kind of leverage somebody within your personal community that you know and use them, especially if they have these sorts of skills, even better. But if they can act as a coach or mentor to you in your career, then that is absolutely ideal. If you already know somebody who can do that for you, then absolutely perfect. If not, that's when things like LinkedIn become really useful, because you are building your own community of people who normally are really willing to help. There are normally groups of people, like physical LinkedIn groups, who are willing to put in some extra time in their free time just to help other people get into their industry, because, you know, everyone wants the latest and greatest talent, don't they? And they all want the people fresh out of school and fresh out of education. So I think definitely utilising your network is really, really important.
Yeah, it's keeping that up to date as well.
Yeah. And having the coach, like I was lucky enough to have Charlotte's mum as a sort of a coach, and someone that sort of kick-started my career in IT. So it is all about also using your own personal network, because they might have an opportunity for you that you didn't even realise.
Definitely. And I think as well, building on using LinkedIn as like a shop front to say you've got to keep it updated, and you know, it's not always about taking either. You know, the fact that, you know, if you've worked with someone in some capacity and, you know, you're asking them for a recommendation that goes on your public profile, you've also got to think about maybe people you've worked with that you can help. And having that link as well on your profile kind of shows, I think, that, you know, you're happy to represent other people as well, which I think is quite a positive thing to put on there as well.
Charlotte, I think this one's mainly would be a good one for you, really. You know, with obviously COVID and obviously changes like that, when we're looking at kind of even just internally, like interviewing new people, obviously everything's got to be done remotely now. And obviously as a business, we go through like different stages of interviews. How do you think it's going to change now with kind of things being done remotely? How do you think an employer is going to kind of start to show the culture? Because obviously that's a big thing, isn't it? You want to join a company and look at the culture, but how are we, for example, going to start to like portray that out to our potential new employees?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, so the typical recruitment kind of strategy of Risual has always been to do as much remotely as possible, but you always meet somebody face to face at the end. That has always been our approach. We've actually just made our first hire for a complete remote process. Our first ever, as far as I'm aware, our first ever hire in that process. So I think what's really important to remember is that interviews are completely one way. So it's not only you trying to sell yourself as a candidate to that company, it is also for the company to sell themselves to you as a candidate, to say, this is the job for you, we think you're right for the job, here's why you should take it, and here's why you should come work for us. Now, there are loads of different ways of doing that, obviously outside of the interview process, but during the interview in particular, it's just so important to make sure that is a two-way process. And that comes back to what James was saying about making sure you ask questions. And that is so important, because not only does it show the interviewer that you're actually interested in the company and you're interested in what's going on, but also it gives you an opportunity to sound out the company and see whether they are somebody that you would want to work for.
Yeah.
Other ways of doing that, really, it will all come down to essentially social media. So what is their employer brand? What sort of recommendations do they have? Do you know somebody who's worked there before? All of those things now, as you said, become so much more important, because you don't get to go to the office and sit down and have a cup of tea with somebody and understand what the vibe is.
Yeah.
And Visual, that is a really big part of who we are, isn't it? That the friendly atmosphere as soon as you walk through the door, all of that kind of stuff I think is really clear. And then trying to demonstrate that remotely is going to be tricky, but you just do it in other ways. So it is literally about your social media presence, your brand online in general, so your website as well. All those kinds of things are just going to become more and more important, definitely.
And do you think it'll reduce the amount of time that for interviews, or do you think that people will still go through the same sort of? Are we still going through the same numbers of interviews to kind of get to a certain point, or do you think because it's going to be remote, it's going to start to be reduced a bit?
I would imagine in the industry that we're in, it might actually open up more people to be accessible to that interview process. So rather than saying, traditionally we'd have a telephone interview, we'd then say, right, we want to see you deliver a presentation, and we want to see you for a face-to-face interview. Actually, by removing that, you're removing any travel implications, especially if they live particularly far away, if they've got any issues at home that mean that they have to stay at home for childcare responsibilities or just general care responsibilities. Opening that up to everybody, it will definitely is a massive benefit of this kind of push, that we've been led into by the current situation. Yeah.
Your point around social media was interesting, Charlotte, because I've done some telephone interviews with people who've actively followed us on social media, and they've kind of really, they've been very passionate about working for the company, partly as a result of following our social media. And it's a good way of quickly working out whether or not they're culturally a good fit for our company.
I think you're right. I think from one of the most important things in terms of employer brand for me when we brought recruitment in-house was, I want somebody in the market to know they want to work for Visual before a job's available. So I want somebody to already know that we're there and to already feel like, yeah, that is definitely the company for me. Then as soon as a job becomes available, they're like, oh, this is it. This is my chance. I'm applying there. This is where I'm going. That's always been what I've been trying to achieve with our brand. Obviously working with the marketing team, not that I'm responsible for our brand at all, but that's what we've been working towards. Oh, there's something else I was going to say then. Oh, yeah. So I think the other thing to remember on social media as well is that can everyone else hear that? Is it just me?
No, I could hear that song.
Oh, I think the important thing to remember as well is that the majority of people now are passive job seekers. So people aren't necessarily actively in the job market looking for a role, and I think it's something like only 30% of the people who are currently say they're looking for work are actively looking for work. The other 70% will just casually scroll through LinkedIn jobs or Indeed and will just casually put an application in, because why not? I've got nothing to lose. It's a one-click apply on Indeed. It doesn't take me any time. I haven't lost anything. And that's so the people you're targeting sometimes is everyone. You're not just targeting the people who are actively available. You're targeting literally anybody who might just be scrolling through LinkedIn at that time, which is really interesting change in the job market, I think.
Yeah, I think especially when you think as well about the amount of changing careers that people go through their time as well, they'll become even, say, more like that, won't they? Because they might just think, oh, I'll give that a try or I'll give that a go, because what have I got to lose? If it's not quite right, I can try something else.
Yeah.
Do you think if a candidate was then to really tailor their covering letter, then that would really stand them out from the crowd then?
Absolutely. I think that's what we'd be looking for. Not only your covering letter, your CV as well, especially if you're looking for a role that's completely different to the one you're currently in. You really want to be able to pull out the bits that are in your CV that are relevant for that role. So really focusing in on the skills that you have and the experience you have that will lead you to believe that you're right for that role, and just focusing on those. You can almost start to cut out some of the more irrelevant things and really focusing on the bits you think the hiring team are going to want to see.
Yeah, or even if you haven't got the experience or previous job role, if you've been in bringing sports in, and for example, you've partaken or you used to be a captain of a team or whatever, I think having that in as a trait or something shows either a degree of leadership or just getting involved. And I think pulling those points out as well are quite important, especially when looking at probably different jobs, new careers or something like that.
And I think bringing your personality out, like you say, around the sort of non-work stuff that you do it's key to building sort of your profile, isn't it? Rather than it just being the amount of CVs that I've seen that could send you to sleep. You want it to pop out of that. You want to capture that person, and you don't want it to be a song and verse around what you've done in work. It's just you ideally want a short but impactful CV.
Yeah.
I'd always recommend anyone get somebody else to proofread it, because there's a number of CVs that I've just rejected because the grammar on it's appalling, which is harsh, I know, but I'm just not going to employ somebody or offer a job to somebody who can't go to the get the detail right.
Yeah, that reminded me, just when you were talking then, Abby, it reminded me of when James, when you said earlier about taking the cup of tea off the hiring manager, that just reminded me that actually you would have stood out in that process. And as Abby said, you really want to be able to put your personality forward in any application you do. You don't just want to be a part one in a pile of 200. You want to be somebody that makes people sit up and really put the effort in to read it. And I think part of that is just being yourself. So if you go to an interview, there's no point sitting there and trying to be who you think they want you to be. You need to just be yourself. And if that means you're a little bit quirky and you take someone else's tea, then fine. You've stood up and you've tried to be yourself, and you've done the right thing. And I think that comes through in things like psychometric testing as well. So throughout a lot of the processes I was involved in as a graduate, there was pretty much always a psychometric testing stage. And I know it's something that we now do at Visual as well, and it's really, really important to try not to second guess yourself in that process, because you're constantly trying to think of what you think the business might want you to put, and actually you just end up in a right pickle, and your personality, kind of the output of that, the scores as such, will just be a complete mess of kind of bits of yourself and then bits of somebody else and then who you think you should be. And actually they're going to be like, well, who is this person? I'm so confused. Whereas if you're just yourself, you answer openly and honestly, then you're much more likely to potentially not more likely to be successful, depending on what they're looking for. But it means that if you get the job, then it's more likely to be the job for you. And really, that's what's important, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've seen, even on LinkedIn and stuff like that, the amount of people that have sort of gone really creative with their CVs as well. So like using different platforms. I've even seen a video CV that people have decided to do a video instead. And obviously using different things, like I've seen some done in Sway. I think if you can look at different ways to make you stand out that matches your personality, then it's got to be helpful.
I think, I suppose, with taking video approaches and different things, as you say, especially when you're going for a lot of jobs, you need to make sure that you're tailored, don't you? Because I know in the past when I was looking for jobs, you've got your covering letter ready and you don't want to just be changing the name. It needs to be a bit more kind of prep than that, doesn't it? So at least if you're doing a video or something slightly different, it's a bit more you, isn't it? And you can start to relate it a bit quicker.
Yeah, definitely.
So in regards to like preparation that people do before interviews, obviously I'm a massive preparer, and James, as my manager, can vouch for how much I like to be prepared for stuff. Kind of what sort of prep does everybody do? Obviously CV's got to be up to scratch, and obviously a detailed covering letter. Obviously there's things like LinkedIn to look at the people who are interviewing you. Sorry, what other sorts of things does everybody kind of look for when they're doing interview prep?
Well, the website's probably a start, then the social media channels. I think it's because my dad's an accountant, but I always go on Companies House. Just to make sure the company's stable and safe before I go and do a job interview. But I think it's just understanding who the directors of those are as well. So you can start to build out. I used to do like a little map, like a brainstorming for each of the companies that I was going for an interview for, just to pick out key themes and people and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree with Companies House. I think it's a good place. That's what I did totally. Is one of the first things I think I did for Visual actually in my interview. What do you know about us? And I started reeling off some facts and stuff. I think that always kind of stands out well. But I think also I think it's also interesting to look at maybe competitors as well, and almost have a look at how different is the company you're applying to. Because I think by bringing that out shows you've not just thought about them, but actually a bit of a step further actually around how actually they're different between their competitors. Because if you're in a sales role, for example, you're going to use that to your advantage, potentially talking with clients and say marketing, it's going to be the same thing. And at the end of the day, it's all about working for an organisation. So you want to see why they're different. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well,
Go on.
I was going to just say that one of the things you're inevitably going to get asked during an interview is tell me a bit about yourself. So I'd practice that opening bit about yourself as well. Because if you get that right, you nail that, you'll probably relax into the interview a lot more because you'll feel like you've got off to a really good start. So you could always kind of even write it down and then just practice at that and make sure you land the first 30 seconds of your interview quite well. That would be one of the tips I would give.
That reminded me of one of the horrible questions you always get asked, like, why is this job good for you? Or why do you think you're a good fit for this job? That's one thing to prep.
Sounds easier said than done, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think just to pick up on something Jack said, I think if I'm interviewing a candidate, I've got a candidate in front of me, whilst I want them to tell me about the company if I ask them. Well, I suppose what we're really looking for is that you've actually spent the time to understand who we are and what we do and a little bit about us. So it's great to be able to say, kind of the fact, if you imagine if you look at a website, you've just got that top little section. If you could repeat that, cool. But really, you haven't got underneath what we do, have you? You haven't quite spent the time to understand it. So as Jack said, going to different platforms, going to Companies House, going on social media, all those things actually will give you a much more rounded picture rather than just, I've found your directors' names off the website, here they are. Okay, cool. But what do we actually do? What do you think's good about that? What do you think's bad? All those kinds of things, and just show that you've actually understood it a little bit, I suppose.
Well, also, you could spin that on its head and question it as well. If you take Visual's own website, good luck trying to explain what Visual does at times. So, and I actually quite enjoy that and find it quite refreshing when you meet and interview candidates or you meet customers who say, tell me about you. What do you actually do? Because you think to yourself, well, fair play, you're giving me some actual constructive feedback about my own website here.
Yeah.
I think I also asked what the company name stood for because it was like it's not like anything else, is it? So it's like, and learning a bit more kind of where the business came from was really nice, and it just kind of gave me an insight into like Rich and Al and the directors and how it was actually how the business came about, which was really nice. So you kind of you feel a bit more assured that it is the company that you want to be working for. So I think that's another good one.
Yeah, it sounds a bit cheesy, but I do feel like the heritage of a business comes up quite a lot in terms of, if they certainly ask you, that's what I think sometimes what they're looking for, especially. I say the one I went to for an interview quite a while ago, and there was literally a test around the company's heritage, where they'd come from, what their founder's name was, and all sorts around them. So yeah, this, like I said, sometimes there's quite a bit of prep you need to do or a bit of research. It always helps.
You can guarantee what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. That will come up at some point in your interview. That is awful, that question, I think.
Yeah, because your weaknesses have actually got to be a strength, haven't they? And all that kind of like.
So you got to do that turn, haven't you?
Psychology.
Yeah. But you're right, James, as well, about the question about just tell me a bit about yourself. That's a really, really common interviewing technique, just to allow the person to relax a little bit, just to get them chatting about something they're comfortable chatting about. What I'm saying is I'm not even asking you to tell me about your upbringing or your education or your work experience. I'm just literally asking a completely general question. Where you take that is down to you, which is why I think it's even more important to prep it, because you can just end up kind of blabbering on, can't you, for like half an hour about yourself, and then suddenly the interview is switched off and we don't know where we are now. So I think that is a really good point.
Lovely. So they were like the main questions really I'd kind of pulled together as a starter for 10. And then I thought we'd talk about kind of why we wanted to create Job Club, but I think we've kind of touched on that as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's certainly, I think we have.
Just want to help.
suppose the call to action is we're here, we're able to help, and if people want to get in touch with us, we're more than happy to provide mentoring, ad hoc support as and when we can. And hopefully in the near future we can start to deliver something a bit more face-to-face rather than it being all done virtually.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Definitely.